Greetings, aloha. This is Dr. Matt. There we go. Greetings, aloha. I wanted to bring up something that just comes to my mind. Tom Brady wrote a book 10, 12 years ago now called the TB12 Method. In the TB12 Method, he talks about principles that kept him in the game. And it's really interesting. Today I'm going to talk about identities, and really what I want to talk about is the energy tax that comes from misaligned identities. And what does that mean? And so Tom Brady wrote this book, and the TB12 Method talks about ways that he has kept himself in the game for so long. I think he played up until he was about 44 years old and played at a high level. And one of the identities, he said that most NFL players, the average actually lifespan of an NFL player is 3 to 4 years in the league. And there's NFL players that play 16, 17, 18 years in the league, and there's many more that wash out in the first 6 months in the league. And so the average is 3 to 4 years in the league. And what he said, and this is profound because this applies to you and applies to you in your business and in your life, is the people that make it to the NFL, they are elite athletes. And so in high school, they were the strongest one in the gym. They lifted the most. They were the fastest. They could jump the highest. And they got into college and they kept that identity as pushing themselves. And now they're with other alpha males. And so push is what they did in the gym. And they got big and bulky and strong. And at some point, as you might know, we use the term muscle bound. And so some of these amazing dynamic athletes, they sacrifice pliability or flexibility to the strength that they had. So as they get into the NFL, they continued that identity. I have to be the biggest, I have to be the strongest. And a lot of NFL players are getting washed out of the league with bicep tendon ruptures or pectoralis muscle ruptures because they built those muscles up so strong and they're pulling constantly at that insertion point, and eventually, plunk, it breaks. And that is a very, very difficult injury to come back from. In fact, many don't come back. And it's an identity problem. Certainly it's a physical issue that happened, but the identity was that they were the strongest and that they had to keep pushing. And so one of the secrets that kept Tom Brady in the league is he was adaptable. So he says that 75% of his workout when he first got into the league was resistance training, was cardiovascular training, it was your typical exercise, and 25% was focused on recovery. And that's a major topic, recovery, and we'll talk about that later, but I focus a lot on the value of recovery, especially when I talk to my athletes. But 75% of his effort was in training, hardcore as we would imagine, and 25% was on recovery. And by the end of his career, he shifted that entirely. So 75% of his effort in training was recovery, and then 25% was resistance and the classic training that you might get as like running, wind sprints, weightlifting, things like that. And so he was adaptable. His identity shifted as he evolved in the league. There's a story of Tom Brady, and I don't know why he's on my mind, but today he's on my mind. There's a story of Tom Brady when he invited one of his wide receivers, Julian Edelman, to LA during the off season. And Tom Brady has a home there. In his home gym, he had the location of the Super Bowl. This was March way before the season started. He had the location of the Super Bowl for the following February. And Edelman asked, like, what is that? And he's like, oh, that's where we're going to play our last game. So he already had his eye on the prize. And Julian's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. That'll be number 3. And he's like, no. I'm going for, Julian Edelman said, awesome. We're going to get you past Joe Montana, who had 3 Super Bowls. And Brady's like, no, I'm not going for Montana. I'm going for Jordan. And so this was before he had even 3 Super Bowls. And so he had his eyes way down there in the prize. So he was willing to adapt into whatever identity got him to that prize. And so here's the application. Here's where I share this with you, is your identity, wherever you're at in life. If you own a business, if you're a professional, if you're a stay-at-home mom, Uh, if you're serving below your capacity or above your capacity, wherever you're at, your identity's got you here. But the real question is, will your identity get you there? And so I had a patient, lovely patient last week that as we get into talking about identities, she recently lost or fractured a business partnership. And in this business partnership, she's kind of figuring out what to do next. And it's devastating because she lost a business that she helped create. That's something that she was passionate about. And it's also exciting because now she was bought out. She has opportunity to start again. And she's at age 54. And so, starting again has its benefits and its drawbacks at that age. And as we were talking, something came very, very clear. And something she said, I paused her and asked her what she meant by that. And what came out of this is there is an identity that she held in this business relationship. And then she referenced, like, in a previous marriage, this identity was present as well. And we started looking back even further into, like, her younger life. This was an identity that she had either been, I don't know about chosen, but she had adopted through. And the identity was being invisible, not seen, not heard. So we talk about the invisible tax that these identities have. This was one of her identities, is that she was invisible, that she's not seen, not heard, and therefore, like, not valued. And so there's the invisible tax around not being valued. If your nervous system, your fight or flight nervous system, is constantly on the lookout for where am I not being valued, who is not seeing me, you will find them. And it is exhausting. There's a tax because, again, it's fight or flight inducing. This becomes a chronic stress. This becomes the invisible energy leakage that we have. So it was beautiful. So with her, we challenged, I paused, we highlighted that identity, and she didn't even know it. She didn't know it was an identity until we brought it back up. And as I showed that to her, it's like showing a mirror to her, tears just streamed down her face. Then I asked her, are you, can you be seen? Can you be heard? Do you desire to be seen? Do you desire to be heard? And with tears rolling down her cheeks, she's like, yeah. And we challenged that identity, and we found that it wasn't true. And we just offered a new identity for her to step into. And so that's a huge thing. High achievers are often performing identities that got them here and won't get them there. Another one is you are exhausted because you can't figure out why, because of the identity drain. So we're not sure what is causing the identity or what is causing the energy drain, and I want to share that it connects oftentimes to your own identities. It doesn't mean that you need to improve your sleep. It doesn't mean that you need to be more disciplined or anything like that. Those are all good things, but perhaps, and this is where I call it invisible, is challenging your identities. So what identities are you performing, and what identities are you just showing up and doing as aligned? And so an identity that you're performing is an identity that is finite. It connects you to energy that's finite, energy that's borrowed, energy that's external. And when you are actually in an aligned identity, so, and we can give some examples of what aligned identities are, but when you are functioning in an aligned identity, you've tapped into unbreakable energy. When you are working within aligned energy, that is renewable, that is sustainable. So some of the work that I've done with patients and I'm privileged to do and I want to do with you is I want to help you realign with an identity that suits you. I want you to help you align your identities with your values. When you connect your values and your identities and then you put in mission and vision around it, you connect to unbreakable energy. So this is an important thing. The difference between achievement energy all has to do with where you're aligned. And so I offer this to you. There's so much more to say on this topic, but in short, I can help solve this issue. It's something, as a chiropractor, we love the word alignment. I've had the privilege of working on lots of patients and helping them align their bodies. And I found that aligning the body only gets us so far. But it has to be mind and it has to be spirit as well. And so identities have to do with what I call a spiritual aspect of us. It has to do with our nervous system. And there's a lot of identities that you have, a lot of identities that I have that are not aligned with my values. These are identities that we're born into. These are identities that are passed down through family lines. And these are identities also that were taught to us at a very young age. Children are better seen, not heard, is an identity that we could step into. Identifying as being less than or not worthy. These are identities that are just handed to you. And before we have the wherewithal, the capacity to question these or challenge these identities, we start acting as if they're true. And the unconscious mind doesn't judge belief patterns, it just validates them. So if you're living an identity that's not aligned with your values, your unconscious mind is just looking to validate it. And so it becomes a belief pattern, and it utterly changes your physiology. And so this is where I'm talking about the invisible energy leakage. So this is why I created the Wheel of Wealth, is we can look through each one of those buckets and see where your leakage is at. So what identities are serving you? What identities are you performing? And what identity are you willing to let go of? I would love to hear. Go ahead and leave some in the comments, and we'll talk to you soon.